Next in our service is an inspirational talk. And we are blessed to have Jane Howard with us this evening. And Reverend Jane Howard was ordained with the class of 2010 at Fellowships of the Spirit, School of Healing and Prophecy. She has served on the executive committee from 2009 to 2016 and was elected again to this body in 2024. Jane was invited to mentor the School of Healing and Prophecy, class number 23, years 2011 to 2013. Jane became a student of Restructuring and 100th Monkey, first as a repeat participant and has since served as staff for these weekend classes. You can find out more about those by talking to Jane after the service, right? We'll just say that. In June of 2019, Jane moved to Cassadaga, New York, leading to many opportunities to serve for Fellowships of the Spirit. I think it was a change in her life, actually, when that happened. She staffed several seminars during the summer of 2019 and served as minister in residence as needed. And that means many, many times. I think that's, I know we met, I believe, as staff for some class many, many years ago.
Yeah, Elaine's master class.
Yeah. Jane served the Healing Temple Meditations coordinator, or she served as the coordinator for those during the summer seasons of 2020 to 2025. She invites ministers to lead the morning meditation at Lilydale as they have time to serve. She also coordinates the Lilydale off-season healing services for the Fellowships months, conducting those services. She continues to staff school weekends and manages the bookstore for seminars, Vespers, and school. Jane is also involved with the Vespers planning and serves as needed for the Sunday Vespers service. Perfect example is this evening. And so let's give Jane a warm welcome.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Good, okay. All righty. Well, yes. It's on?
Okay, perfect. Yeah.
It is on. Okay. When Joanne and Mark and I were coming up with this list of topics, and inner alchemy was chosen as one, I thought, we'll never be asked to do that one. And sure enough, 2 weeks ago, I was asked if I could do tonight, and what's the topic, please? Inner alchemy. I was like, oh man, and my guides are like up there going, go for it, you have to do it, you know, this is your topic. And I'm like, no, it's not my topic. And then I can hear Joanne going, phew, if she's going to do it, I'm not going to have to. So she's chairing instead of up here, but I probably would have been chairing if you had to do this. So that's right. Yeah. So here we are. All right. So she gave you some really good definitions of alchemy and a little bit of introduction into the inner alchemy. And in the reading that I did, there are two things that can really rewire us, our alchemy within. And one is along the lines the Taoist and the Buddhist and the Hindu and Christian, many denominations and disciplines that have a lot of prayer activity or meditation activity. And we learn in Fellowships of the Spirit, in the spiritual insight trainings, that it takes 14.4 minutes a day to make that shift in you as you start to meditate and find different ways to do it. Now, there's a lot of different ways that we can work with doing it, and so one of the favorite things, and I do this occasionally, I'm not going to read this whole page, but on page 333 of 365 Tao, and we do have this, yes, on the bookshelf. It's about, the title of it is Donkey. And it says, dismount your donkey at the summit. And that applies to what I've just been saying. Because your donkey might be sutras. It might be breath work. It might be the rosary. It might be a mantra. It might be a syllable. It might be looking at a flame. There are so many ways that we can get up to that summit. And the donkey's a different donkey for everybody depending on what your discipline is. Okay? And so I just want to say there's no, and it says right in here, there's no one exact way of doing it because we all have a different way. And the donkeys all take different paths to get to that summit, to get to that silence, to get to that space where our alchemy begins to shift. Okay? So I wanted to point that out before I go too much further with it, because the other thing that can dramatically change our alchemy within is trauma. That was the other part that I saw working with it, because when we have a traumatic experience, everything changes. Okay, and that's more instantaneous sometimes than working with the meditations and creativity. I mean, I see people like to draw and things like that. That's a form of meditation. Sometimes knitting is a form of meditation. There's a lot of ways that we can do that and that we can bring some balance back. And it's actually, there's an alchemy therapy for trauma that is worked with and that's recommended. And that can be through yoga, it can be through breath work, it can be through swimming, it can be through running, it can be through brain respiration, which I don't think gets enough credit for a whole lot of things. That's an Ilchi Lee Korean discipline that is really the father of Qigong. And Qigong's another one that they talk about as being something that can really change your inner alchemy, especially if there's been trauma or something that you can work with as you go along to make those shifts and changes within inside yourselves. So Creating True Peace is another book that I love, 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 and that is also back on there. And it's written by Thich Nhat Hanh, who experienced a great deal of trauma, you know, in Vietnam with the French occupation and the types of things that he had to work with. And he talks about when we're working with things like anger or fear or happiness, it can be any emotion, that we recognize that emotion. We become aware of that emotion, whatever it is, and then we sit with that emotion. And if it's anger or jealousy or grief or guilt or whatever it is that we're sitting with, then the next step is to smile on that emotion. And that's also in the Taoist literature as well as the Buddhist literature. So those are things that can work with those different things. And why am I talking about this, all of this betwixt and between things? Because do I have a story for you? Last week, one of the events that ended up occurring during the week was that my brother, who had received a sailboat from his kids, his 4 kids, for Father's Day this year, they had the sailboat out, and they actually, my nephew, who grew up sailing, sailed with my another nephew-in-law to get the boat to where it needed to be, and they tied it up fairly close to where my brother's house is on Eggs Head Island, and the sound that they're on, that they're facing the island across the way, is Roanoke. And on Tuesday morning, I knew that we saw that sailboat there. But on Tuesday afternoon, as we were coming back from whatever it was we were doing, the sailboat was gone. It was missing. And so that created a circumstance where they had to go across the sound and figure out where the sailboat was, and they were able to do it because people had called the police and the sheriff's department and said there's a sailboat that's without anybody in it, you know, da-da-da-da-da. So they had pulled it to safety, and my brother was able to find out where that safety was. And so the next morning, everybody else other than my brother and my brother-in-law went to a magic show. That's important. We went to a magic show. And they started to sail the boat across the way. Now, in the teachings that Elaine works with, and I've heard Angie talk about it too, in Insight Training, and I think in School 1 as well, is that sometimes there's a disturbance in the force. And a lot of times that happens with families. Something disturbs that. When we cultivate through the meditations, through the mediumship, through healing circles and distant healing that we do in school and out of school, and sometimes with our own development circles and our own ways, we cultivate that inner alchemy that is receptive to those disturbances in the force. So I'm sitting there in the car on the way to the magic show, grateful that I'm just in a car with adults and not all of the grandkids. And so I could kind of close my eyes and just pretend I was resting my eyes. And I'm sitting there talking to my guides, and I'm saying, is this something that I need to know? And I heard they both chosen to survive. So I'm thinking this is my brother and brother-in-law that were in the sailboat. So throughout the magic show, I'm trying to center and trying to send energy, because my guides told me send light and energy. And so I sent light and energy, working with them. And then when we got to the magic show, I thought, oh, well, you know, we can send some of the joy of this. And my guide said, silly woman, send the magic. So we sent the magic, you know. And you can kind of do that. You separate yourself a little bit, but you're still aware of where everybody else is in connection with you, because we were there were, at that point, 20 of us as a family sitting together with the grandchildren, and the parents, and the grandparents and everything like that. So we enjoyed the magic show. And then after the magic show, my sister received a picture on her phone that my sister-in-law sent her. And the caption was, you'll find out about this when you get home. He is safe. And it was a picture of my brother-in-law. My brother-in-law had lost his cap, lost his glasses, and he was soaking wet. And the other message was, Eric is with the Coast Guard with the sailboat. My brother. Well, that's a pretty traumatic experience that we're having here. And the important part with the donkey, my brother-in-law often, when we're together on vacations or if I'm at their house visiting, he and I have a similar time where we like to meditate in the morning and then have a cup of coffee afterwards. And we can frequently sit in the same room. He does a daily devotional, he reads the Bible, he does his prayers for the morning, and I sit in the silence. And so they're different mechanisms, but I really feel that Jeff, in particular, he's really reached that level where he's doing more than 14.4 minutes a day, because he does the morning and the evening, but he's in prayer a whole lot. Just like if somebody said the rosary several times, they'd be in prayer for, you know, several moments without, you know, necessarily going into the same kind of silence that we would go into if we're doing sutras or breath work or whatever it is that we're going to. And so when he was out there praying, this is what he said, you know, coming back afterwards, I was praying the entire time that I would have the strength to get to the shore. And honestly, when I was sitting there, I thought I heard helicopters going over my head. They were going over Jeff's head, because my brother had his phone in the sailboat. He got back up into the sailboat. Jeff wasn't, the boat capsized. They were both out of the boat. They were able to put the boat back up together. Eric was able to get back in the boat, Jeff wasn't. And so Jeff decided he wanted to swim to shore. And Eric didn't know a thing about sailing, and the wind was 27 miles an hour that day. And that boat was just spinning, you know, wherever it was going. So someone from the shore had seen the capsized sailboat and already got the Coast Guard going and the Sheriff's Department going. And then when my brother called, he was able to give more definition to it. So there were helicopters out that did see my brother-in-law swimming about a half an hour after he'd started swimming. And when my brother got onto the Coast Guard boat, he heard the communication from the helicopters that yes, there was a survivor and he was alive in the water, but they couldn't identify him. And even though after he got to the EMT station, they still couldn't identify him because of the hip loss. And so my brother, it was about 45 minutes before he knew that Jeff was safe when he saw him. He was pretty traumatized. So was Jeff. And there are levels of, and I have to continue this, like a little bit. It was really, we were all very glad, and we're listening to Jeff tell this whole story about what was going on. And one of his 11-year-old granddaughters looked at him and said, "Grandpa, were you wearing a life preserver?" "No, and let that be a lesson to you," he says. And she just looked at him, she says, "Grandpa, let that be a lesson to you." Because it was a whole different series of things. So the other thing that, bear with me for a little bit longer here, the other thing that I have seen a number of times, my very favorite movie is The Legend of Bagger Vance. The Legend of Bagger Vance. It's a great movie, and it's a golf metaphor for the Bhagavad Gita. It's a fabulous movie. And in that movie, Arjuna, as it were. I was just laughing. Yeah, and the Bagger Vance. What Bagger Vance was trying to do was help Arjuna to find that perfect swing, that swing that he'd lost, because he had a traumatic experience in World War I, and all of his company was lost, and he was the only one that survived. And so when he came back, he couldn't even think about golf, and he lost his swing. So Bagger Vance was there to try and help him work a swing. And so there's 4 quotes that I have from that I whittled down from 15. So just be glad that there's only 4. "There's a perfect swing inside of each one of us. All you have to do is get out of the way." Doesn't that apply to a mediumship? In a whole lot of ways. "Your swing is somewhere in the harmony of all that is, all that was, and all that will be." "The field doesn't care what you believe, only what you do." And this is my favorite one. "Know that all that is flows from the field and the knower." And the reason that I brought all of these metaphors in is because my brother, who did not go, and one of my niece's husbands, who was scheduled to, did not go, but Jeff did, and Dale did, one of his sons-in-law, to play 18 holes of golf that afternoon. Eric was too tired from the ordeal, and Jeff just wanted to do something to get it off his mind. And God bless him, he got a hole-in-one. He's been playing golf for 50 years, and this is the one time he got a hole-in-one. So that's why the golf metaphor is, because, as I said, he's the one who prays a whole lot, and he's able to just kind of let go and let things happen the way that they want to, and he found that perfect swing. And had he not been meditating and praying and had the experience that he had this morning, maybe that hole-in-one wouldn't have happened. Maybe it would. It was encouraging for my brother to hear that, though. And I'm not going to tell you a whole lot more about the next day, because it took some doing to get my brother up and running again. And there were a number of other times that I was hearing from my guides about, what needed to happen next and that kind of thing, to make suggestions for what was going on. And at the end of Thursday, or the middle of Thursday afternoon, the grandparents, the parents, and the kids all went to the park, and I was alone, so I could be in the silence. And I sent distant healing to my brother, who was still really struggling, which we found out from his wife, because she was giving us, progress reports and things like that. And so since I know his energies and I know his guides and things like that, I could send, you know, what I needed to send to him in a good way, because we are family, and that's part of what the inner alchemy works with, I think. So at the end of it, I'm giving thanks to the guides, angels, teachers, loved ones in spirit that are assisting with this healing like I always do. And I hear my mother and my sister-in-law, my brother's first wife, who's in spirit, saying, "We're all here, Jane." I thought, cool. And that's what inner alchemy can do. You know, when you have that cultivated faith, that cultivated compassion, that cultivated healing, the cultivated distance stuff, you can work through and help people work through the things that they need to work through at the time, and everybody's fine at this point. And my brother is turning 60 next week, and he's really looking forward to it. His kids are going to be home, and he's in really good shape at this point, and so is my brother-in-law and their whole families. And we are all extremely grateful. Extremely grateful. And that's what I have to say this evening. That's inner alchemy and how you can experience it if you're open to it, when you're open to it. What do you think?
I think I'll take the non-traumatic experience.
I know, yeah. I know.